Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paul Tayo, Regional Sales Director at Reliant Behavioral Health, the provider of the Employee Assistance Program benefits to participating OEBB employers, employees, and dependents. Beginning this contract year, the EAP has expanded its work-life balance benefits to include resilience resources. Today's presentation will be the first in a series of 3 resilience webinars presented this contract year, with the second and third webinars occurring in the winter and spring of 2019. Having worked both as a certified and classified employee in the public school system, I am keenly aware of the ongoing stressors faced by school employees. Indeed, I am one of the nearly 50% of teachers who leave the profession within 5 years of starting. This alarming statistic is, of course, not without cause, and the high stress is certainly not limited to just teachers. Rather, all in-school employees are vulnerable. The work is challenging on so many fronts, and the resulting stress and anxiety can be overwhelming to the point of impacting relationships outside of work, increasing behaviors that put one's health at risk, and potentially compromising one's ability to be at their best in their important career roles. As you're about to learn in today's webinar, there are some highly effective ways to go about recognizing and responding more constructively to the daily stressors of work and at home, and to that end, we are very privileged to have James E. Porter as our presenter. James Porter is the founder of Stress.com and has been producing stress management training materials for over 20 years. He has presented seminars on stress management at West Point and for the FBI, Navy, Department of Homeland Security, American Heart Association, International Stress Management Association, and Time Life headquarters in New York City. His work has been reported on in a wide variety of national media, including Good Morning America, PM Magazine, Ladies Home Journal, as well as several medical journals. So it is with much honor and enthusiasm that I welcome James Porter to present today's webinar, Building Resilience and Reducing Stress, both at home and the workplace.
Thank you, Paul, for that very nice introduction. I really appreciate that, and it's really a pleasure to be here. As you know, the title of my program today is Building Resilience and Reducing Stress, both at home and at work. And one of the first things I want to stress is the fact that, when we get busy, what's the first thing to go? It's that walk you were going to do in the afternoon, or maybe the trip you were going to take to the gym, and or maybe just a long hot bath that you wanted to take, or just relaxing somewhere. When things get hectic, that goes right out the window. And so what the point of that little introduction is that we tend to put stress management last. And I'm hoping by the end of this program, you'll really see the importance and the value of putting stress management first instead of last. So let's go on to the next slide. And over the course of the next 50 minutes, I'm going to teach you about my stress number system, which I wrote about in my book, Stop Stress This Minute. It'll help you monitor your stress throughout the day. We're going to introduce you to some facts and figures about stress that will kind of help you understand why it's so important to manage stress. We're going to talk about something called counterproductive coping, which is how the average person manages his or her stress. And we're going to talk about some obstacles that we're going to have to overcome if we want to get to this promised land where we put stress management first instead of last. We've got a poll question coming up here, we're going to ask you, what do you value more than anything else? Do you value family? Do you value career, spiritual beliefs, your health? And we want you to just vote on that on that poll question right now, so that we can kind of get our values. Values are going to play an important role in what we talk about today. So let's answer this question, and we'll leave the poll open for about another minute, and we'll give you how people responded.
Okay. Jim, it looks like the answers are in to the poll, and family received 89%, career 6%, spiritual beliefs, religion 33%. Your health was 33%.
Can you give me those facts, those percentages again?
You bet. Family was far and away the leader at 89%. Career, 6%. And spiritual beliefs, religion, 33%. And the same for health was 33% as well.
Oh, okay.
Interesting distribution.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Okay, so so that's our poll question that relates to, you know, putting stress management first instead of last, and that sort of falls under our health. We're also going to talk about our stress prevention model, which is cognitive restructuring and mindfulness, and we're going to teach you some relaxation techniques and just some things that you can do on the fly. And then we're going to talk, and we're going to conclude the program by talking about putting stress management first instead of last. So well, let's go on to the next slide. Whoops, we went one too far. So here's some facts and figures about stress. 62% of Americans rate their jobs as highly stressful. 1 million Americans are absent from work every day due to stress. And then, according to the American Psychological Association, workplace stress is as bad for the heart as smoking and high cholesterol. And then here's my, I think the most interesting stat of all, this one from the American Institute of Stress here at the bottom. 75 to 90% of all visits to primary care physicians are for stress-related concerns. Now, that's a whopping big number. And what I think makes it even more interesting is when you go to the doctor rarely talks about stress in that 6 or 7 minutes that the doctor has to see you. And there's a very good reason for that. Stress is a very complicated subject, and there's just not time to address it. So it's really important for you to learn everything you can about stress. And that's why, you know, being involved with this program, I think, is going to be very helpful. So let me go to the next slide. And so during I said we were going to talk about the stress number system, and that's a system that I came up with, wrote about in my book, and it's based on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being total absence of stress or tension, kind of like how you'd feel after a massage or a really great workout, and 10 is a panic attack. Now, if you've never had a panic attack, some people admit themselves to the emergency room at the hospital when they have a panic attack. So I can almost guarantee that no one listening right now is having a panic attack. And I doubt that very much that anybody's at a 0. I think most people spend their days, you know, sort of somewhere between the numbers 2 and a 5 or a 6 and maybe a 7 on a really stressful day. So I want you to think about, what is your stress number right now? What do you think it might be? Where do you think you are right now? And I want you to kind of file that away in the back of your mind, because we're going to try to lower that number later on when we do the relaxation techniques. So the other thing I want you to think about is starting each day at a 0 or a 1. Once you see how you can lower your stress, you'll see the importance of starting your day at a 0 or a 1. Now, the reason you want to do that is that stress is cumulative. It's no one straw that breaks the camel's back. It's a succession of events that happen one after another after another. Every time you experience stress in your day, adrenaline and cortisol are released into the bloodstream, and it usually takes about an hour or so for that adrenaline and particularly the cortisol to come back to its normal baseline level. And if you experience one stressful event after another, because your cortisol hasn't fully left your system, your stress levels are going to build and it's in a kind of a stair-step way throughout the day. And if you've ever blown your top at 3 o'clock in the afternoon over something that normally wouldn't even bother you, now you know why that happens. It's because stress is cumulative. So now I want to sort of change directions a little bit and ask you this question, which I realize you can't answer, but I want you to think about this question. How do you think the average person manages his or her stress? I want you to really think about that. What do you think the average person does to manage his or her stress? So I when I first started putting this slide into my programs, I really hoped that in my live programs that people would shout out, they meditate, they exercise, they do yoga. But it seems like everybody gets that the real answer to this is they drink, they smoke, they eat emotionally, they spend money on things they can't afford, and they engage in high-risk behaviors like gambling and minor infractions of the law like speeding. So this is known by psychologists as counterproductive coping. Obviously, if you're trying to manage your stress this way, and some of these things really do lower your stress in the short term, but in the long term, they're going to lead to even more stress and more problems. So that's why it's called counterproductive coping. So when you think about this, it really leads us nicely to this slide, because stress doesn't always directly cause health problems. Sometimes it causes the unhealthy lifestyle choices that lead to health problems. That's why Leslie Hammer, an occupational health psychologist, likes to say stress is the cause of the causes. So as our stress goes up, so does getting less sleep, so does smoking more, so does getting less exercise, or maybe more accurately, feeling like you don't have time to exercise, which gets back to our initial point about, putting stress management last instead of first. So when you get stressed out, you feel, I don't have time to do that. I don't have time to make a proper meal. I'm just going to grab this bag of chips and eat that. So you really start to see that stress is a much bigger issue than we even realize. So that's why we really have to be very aware of the fact that this is our natural tendency. I mean, even I will open up a bag of chips at the end of a stressful day. Now, as long as you do that with awareness, you'll stop yourself short before you eat a whole, family-sized bag of chips. So we also, if we want to get to this promised land where we're putting stress management first instead of last, we really have to overcome some obstacles, one of which is just the fact that our culture, our American culture, seems to promote stress and distraction, almost like it's a badge of honor. People love to juggle, 5 different tasks at once. They love to multitask. People love to tell you they're crazy busy, It's something that we seem to be proud of. And of course, we have a mindset against managing stress. We don't want to relax. We want to be busy all the time, working. That work ethic, it really seems to be driving us. So, the idea of sitting on a couch and closing your eyes and repeating a word silently to yourself, in other words, meditation, that's kind of an anathema to most people. Then we've got the problem that doctors really don't, one of the reasons they don't talk about stress in a 6-minute appointment is, one, because it's just too complicated, and another is because they don't get any training around even stress-related disease, let alone, how to manage their own stress. Doctors are some of the most stressed out people you'll ever meet. So I'm sorry if there are any doctors out there, but they really do. They're just overwhelmed and overloaded with, and really suffer from burnout at higher levels than the regular population. So we've got these issues that we're going to have to overcome if we want to get to the point where we're really putting stress management first instead of last. Now, when you do go to the doctor, what is it that the doctor does all day? When you do that little 6-minute appointment, well, the doctor's probably going to write you a prescription. And what you need to know, and this is really important, is that prescriptions only mask the symptoms of stress. They don't take away the source of the problem. For example, if you have insomnia, and we know that 50% of all insomnia is stress-related, you're taking that pill, you're not addressing maybe it's a toxic boss that you have, or maybe it's a relationship problem. You're not taking away the thing that's keeping you up at night. We're just taking away the symptom. The same would be true for chronic pain if it's caused by stress. You're just taking away the symptom. You're not taking away the source. And that allows you to kind of ignore your stress while it silently builds up over time. You're kind of sweeping it under the rug instead of actually facing it and looking at the symptom as, what is this symptom trying to tell you? And to me, that's like paving over the rumble strip by the side of the highway because you don't like how it feels when you go over it. Well, that would be crazy, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but that rumble strip has saved my life on numerous occasions. It's kept me from crashing and burning. And that's exactly That's exactly what our stress symptoms are designed to do, to keep us from crashing and burning. So we want to pay attention to them. We don't want to medicate them away so that we lose our motivation to want to make a change. So if we ignore our stress symptoms long enough, we're going to end up on this bad boy list of stress-related dis-ease. Now notice how I've hyphenated that word disease. It's there to remind you that even the word disease is a synonym for the word stress. Now, I'm not saying that stress single-handedly causes all the things you see on this list. Usually it just contributes to these things. But let's take heart disease as an example. The #1 killer in the United States well, not by far. I mean, cancer is a close second, but if you look at all the other things, it is by far. So heart disease, major killer, and usually stress is considered to be one of the top 3 risk factors. Now, for heart disease, so if you're eating a healthy diet and you are getting some exercise and you're not a smoker, well, stress might be your #1 risk factor. So you can see how that plays into this particular example, and it's really how it applies to all the things you see on this list. All right, so we don't want to end up on that list. So how do we change? How do we avoid ending up on that list? Well, we've got these problems that we're going to have to overcome. We've got the problem of people putting stress reduction last instead of first, or even second or third or fourth, I'd be happy with. They engage in counterproductive coping, which leads to even more stress and more problems. Doctors are prescribing drugs that allow you to sweep your stress under the rug and kind of ignore it. And then, we didn't talk about this, but a lot of the stress management techniques that other people teach are things that you can't do while you're at work. And we want to give you tools. I mean, we spend more time at work than we spend doing anything else, including sleeping. So we want to give you tools that you can use while you're at work. So that's why I came up with this 6-step, it's like a tongue twister, 6-step stress prevention model. So I'm going to introduce you to these 6 steps right now, and then we're going to go into each one in more detail. So step 1 is about raising awareness and the importance of managing stress, and that's kind of what we've been doing for the last 10 minutes. Step 2 is about problem solving or avoiding unnecessary stress, and we'll certainly talk more about that when we get to step 2. Step 3 is about cognitive restructuring. It's kind of a $5 word to describe really just how your thinking affects your experience of stress. And then step 4 is about mindfulness and understanding the value of staying in the present moment. Step 5 is about resilience, and in my take on resilience, we really look at it at doing the same old things that people have been teaching you to do around stress management for years, but doing it proactively. And then step 6 is about social support, which I maintain is your #1 weapon against stress. Now, that may surprise you, but if you think about it, when you go through the most difficult times in your life, what is it that gets you through those times? Well, usually it's the help of friends, family, support groups, counselors, doctors. It's your social support network that gets you through it. So we really tend to undervalue that network, and we need to kind of reverse that trend. And we'll talk about how you can easily do that as we move through the program and we get to step 6. So let's start with step 1, raising awareness. And probably a good place to begin is to get a real solid understanding of what the basic symptoms of stress are. And I've listed a few here. There are over 50 signs and symptoms of stress, and you can look them all up at my website, stressstop.com. So here are some symptoms: rapid heartbeat, cold hands, dry mouth, muscle tension, headaches, sleeplessness, upset stomach. And what I want you to really do is to start connecting the dots between your symptoms of stress and your sources of stress. So if you feel, if your boss walks into the room and your heart is beating out of your chest, well, you want to pay attention to that. And, that's a message that's being conveyed to you. And you want to say, well, what do I need to do about this message? If you've got a toxic boss, maybe you need to either go to HR or request a transfer, or maybe even if it's bad enough, start looking for another job. But, you also maybe it's just you, and maybe you need to talk to your coworker who doesn't seem to be bothered by your boss at all. So these are all some options that we'll explore as we move through the program. But the idea here is to connect the dots between your symptoms of stress and your sources of stress, and then take action. Because when we take action at the symptom level, we can avoid ending up on that bad boy list. It makes stress-related disease preventable. It's only when you ignore those symptoms and sweep them under the rug that you end up on that list. So this also involves, as I already said, just taking a different message from your stress symptoms. Just knowing that rumble strip could possibly save your life. That's the way we need to think about our stress symptoms. So here we are at step 2. This is the problem-solving step, and this is where I talk about eliminating unnecessary stress. A lot of the stress in our lives is really completely unnecessary. I find that one of the easiest ways to kind of figure this out, and I would like you to think about this as your first homework assignment, is to write down, make a list of your top 10 sources of stress. So, just sit down, maybe spend a half an hour talking about your top 10, or thinking about what your top 10 sources of stress are. So that leads us to our next poll question, which is, what is your number 1 source of stress? Is it relationship problems, job stress, financial stress, or time pressure? So this poll will help us understand what are the top 10 sources of stress. So we'll leave the poll open for about a minute, and then we'll come back with our results. So do we have our results, Paul?
We do, Jim. So relationship problems constituted 33% of people's number 1 stressors. Looks like job stress was the number 1 stressor for 62% of the people responding. And financial stress and time pressure were both at 29% respectively.
Okay, great. I'm surprised about financial stress. That's good. Usually job stress, according to the American Psychological Association and their polls, those 2 stressors usually go neck and neck. So interesting. I always like to see something that runs different and to what you typically see out there. So just spending some time thinking about what are your top 10 sources of stress. In the medical profession, there's an old expression that says, diagnosis is 50% of the cure. So by sitting down, and I really urge you to do this today, tonight, whenever you can, to sit down and write down your top 10 sources of stress, you'll start to think about solutions. You'll go from being problem-oriented to being solution-oriented, which I think is a really key thing to do when you're thinking about problem solving. So the other method that I suggest is to keep a log or a journal of your stress for at least a week, preferably 2. And what you'll find is that when you do this, and it's hard for me to get people to do this, but I really think it's a very critical thing to do, because if you do this for a couple of weeks, you'll see all sorts of patterns start to emerge. You'll see certain times of day that are stressful, and you'll say, oh, wow, if I just got up a little bit earlier in the morning rush wouldn't be so stressful. Or you'll see a certain activity that's really stressful for you, or you might see even the name of a particular person just pop up on your journal over and over again. So the cool thing about this aspect is a lot of people like me are out there saying you can only manage stress, you can't eliminate it. But that's not true. When you take this approach, you can actually eliminate a lot of unnecessary stress. So that's step 2 for problem solving. Step 3 is really got to be my favorite step of all. And that would be, let's see, there we go, the cognitive restructuring step. Now, cognitive refers to thinking or knowing. It relates to your perception. Restructuring is reorganizing, rebuilding, or changing. So put it together and you get reorganizing the way you perceive the world. And oftentimes trainers will use the synonym reframing. It's a reframe when you do cognitive restructuring. So if you've heard that term, they're kind of interchangeable. So I define it as changing the way you think during a stressful situation. So this is a very powerful practice, and I'll show you exactly why as we move through the next few slides. So the first thing you need to do when you're thinking about cognitive restructuring is to start becoming aware of your negative self-talk. It's going on inside your head all the time. In fact, you may be thinking right now, you know, this program's a little boring. I really kind of wish I'd done something else today. Or, you know, there's always this talk goes on constantly. And one of the ways to kind of get a control over this negative self-talk, so it's not kind of running your life without you being aware of it, is to really understand this equation that was developed by a psychologist named Albert Ellis. The activating event, A, plus your beliefs, B, equals the consequence. So any source of stress would be an activating event. Could be a lost set of car keys, an angry boss, could be a fight with your spouse, it could be a traffic jam. Those are all A's. Your beliefs about that are the thoughts that you think, the interpretations, really, of the activating event. So, you know, if you get a flat tire, and we'll look at the flat tire as our big example, so I won't use that now. But let's say you get stuck in traffic, and you say to yourself, oh, this is going to take forever to clear. Well, that's just not true. And so it's a faulty belief. And it's a belief and a thought that you can change. And by so doing, you change how you experience your stress at sea. Now, most people just think that A equals C, that a flat tire or an angry boss or a traffic jam just automatically equals stress. But what you're going to learn as we move through the next couple of slides is that that's just not true, that it's really the event plus your interpretation of it that's leading to stress. And it can be very liberating once you really get a handle on how to alter your thoughts at B. So here are, as I said earlier, our big example is a flat tire. Your flat tire is an A. Your thought about the tire is a B. Now, think about how thoughts unfold in a situation like this. You know, you come out to your car, you're on your way to work, and you say, you know, oh, I've got a flat tire. You know, now it's going to take forever to fix. I could never fix this myself. I don't have anybody who can help me. If I don't get this fixed in short order, I'm going to be late for work. And if I'm late for work, I could miss that client meeting. If I miss that client meeting, I could lose my job. Now, obviously, that's a little bit exaggerated, but that's how people's minds work in a situation like this, particularly when they're stressed. So the point of cognitive restructuring is to realize that all of this negative self-talk is a total exaggeration of the truth. It may have a kernel of truth to it, but mostly you've just been throwing fuel on the fire of your stressful event. So how you feel inside at C is going to be dramatically more stressful than it would be if you could alter your thinking at B. And let's take a look at the next slide and you'll see exactly what I mean. So here's the same A, but here's a person who said, you know what? I've never changed it. I mean, I'm just inventing this, of course, but, you know, I've never changed a tire, but I've got an owner's manual. I can figure this out. I can do this. And that's how you can really alter what happens to you at C by changing your thoughts at B. Stephen Covey, the author of the book the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, was kind of quoting Viktor Frankl when he said, all our opportunity for personal growth lies in the small space between stimulus and response. Now, let me read that again, because this is a really powerful statement. All our opportunity for personal growth. This is really all the things that we want out of life, and to become, better adept at handling stress certainly falls under this category of personal growth. So it lies in this small space between stimulus and response. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's the ABC equation. The stimulus is A, the response is C, and that small space is B. So what we have to do is learn to tease out that space. When we see an A coming at us, we just got to say, hey, I recognize that. That's a source of stress. That's an A. And I just need to decide how I want to respond at B. And that's a very powerful thing to do, is to choose a different response than that knee-jerk response that you've got all locked and loaded and ready to go. You choose another response in that situation, and that's where you see this powerful statement come true. So that's the cognitive restructuring step. So here we are at mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is a really hot kind of buzzword right now, and I think, unfortunately, people sort of think they know what mindfulness means, and usually it revolves around staying or being in the present moment. And it's kind of a cliche, and I think a lot of people don't have any idea what being in the present moment is. But, this picture that you see on the slide here is a really good example of somebody doing something mindlessly. And that's something that's easy to understand. When we do things mindlessly, these are the things that we kind of do on autopilot. Like when I've had an occasion where I was driving across town, I was heading to a paint store that was right across the street from a grocery store that I go to all the time, whereas I rarely go to the paint store. So I set my autopilot for the grocery store. I knew I was going to go right across the street from it, but when I got there, I just automatically drove into the grocery store parking lot. And I'm sitting there, I'm going, wait, what am I doing here? And think about that. We have the ability to drive a piece of heavy machinery without even thinking about it. Or when you go to the mall, you park your car, you come back 2 hours later, you have no idea where you parked it. Or maybe you've needed something from the kitchen, and you're in your bedroom, and by the time you get to the kitchen, you have no idea what you came in there for. You open the fridge, you look around, and that's all mindlessness. And these are very, it's just kind of gives you a handle on, mindlessness is the opposite of mindfulness. And we can do this, we can do things mindlessly when we're doing any repetitive task, whether it's ironing, mowing the lawn, filing papers, folding laundry, and most of all, when we're doing the dishes. Now, when I first encountered mindfulness, I was in a story that was being told by Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a writer on the subject of mindfulness, very prolific and really nice, short, concise books on mindfulness. Lots of mindful approaches to dealing with anger, for example, is one of his books. So when I first heard this story 25 years ago, I completely rejected it. And the story was simply this, that when he did the dishes, he noticed the hot water on his hand. He could hear the sound of the brush swirling around in the pot, and he could smell the soap wafting up into his nose. Well, at that time, I said to myself, well, why would anybody want to think about doing the dishes? Isn't there something better that you could think about? And I put that question to you right now. Why would you want to think about doing the dishes while you were doing the dishes? Now, I realize you can't answer, but I just want you to think about that for a moment. Why would you want to think about doing the dishes? Well, now, when you do the dishes, is the first thing that comes to mind, wow, I just got such a great life. I love my husband. He's the perfect husband. He always, makes the bed in the morning, and my kids are so polite, and, everything's just great. Unfortunately, I don't think that's what most of us think when we're doing the dishes. I think our minds like to latch onto problems. And in the way that we latch onto problems when we're doing something mindlessly, it tends to not be productive at all. Like if you sit down and you write down your top 10 sources of stress and you apply your thinking and creative brain to solving those problems, that's a great use of your time. But just to let your mind wander off to some problem that you have, it's just going to swirl around in your head and you won't get anywhere with it. It's really not pleasant. So now you start to see the value of thinking about what you're doing while you're doing it. And the classic example that I love to give is when you're in the shower. Now, I've been in the shower many times where I've been in the shower 5, 10, 15 minutes. My hair's wet, but I have no idea whether I shampooed it or not. And when that happens, I realize that I have just spent a mindless 15 minutes in the shower. My mind went off to something else, like, the dentist appointment I have next week. Now, this really happened to me. I was in the shower. I'm thinking about I was just going in for a checkup, to get my teeth cleaned. And I rarely get cavities. I've never had a root canal, but I'm thinking about, well, what if I get a cavity? I'm in the shower. I'm thinking about getting a cavity, and I'm thinking about, well, what if I have a root canal? So now, stress chemicals are being released into my bloodstream because I'm actually thinking about what it might be like, even though I have no idea what it might be like to get a root canal. That must be horrible. And so now, instead of paying attention to what I was doing, which was taking this wonderfully relaxing shower, I'm in a dentist chair. And really, all of us can do this, and all of us cannot do it. And that's what mindfulness is all about. Now you really understand the value of paying attention on purpose. And we can do this kind of practice. This is referred to as everyday mindfulness practice, just about all throughout our day. So here's another technique besides cognitive restructuring, which I failed to mention is something that you can do on the fly while your stress is happening and nip it in the bud without anyone knowing you're using cognitive restructuring. In the same way, we can use mindfulness to kind of, at any point during the day, to kind of just take our mind off of wherever it's wandered to keep us, to get us stressed. And when you think about it, it's when our mind wanders off into the future that we get anxious. And when it goes back into the past and reviews things that have already happened and can't be changed, that's when we get angry. So there's a tremendous value to staying in the present moment. And we can do that just by listening to people, like you're listening to me now. Maybe this is really hitting home for you and you're saying, wow, that's really interesting. You're totally in the present moment because you're really listening. Or noticing sense perceptions more. You can do this right now. Notice how your clothes feel on your back. Notice how your body feels in the chair. Notice a pleasant smell if there happens to be one nearby. I love it when I'm outside and I can be mindful of nature, like a breeze. There's nothing better than a warm day where you get that cool breeze. It's incredible. The sunset, the stars at night, these are all opportunities to be mindful. Really, some of the best moments in life are these mindfulness moments. Being mindful while you're eating, savoring every bite, spending time with pets. All of these things can really be incredible sources of mindfulness. So that's the mindfulness piece. What we're going to do right now is we're going to sort of mix it up a little bit. We're going to do a series of relaxation techniques, and let's just jump right into this. Now, if you'll recall, I asked you what your stress number was. So I want you to sort of keep that in the back of your mind. We're going to see if we can't lower it a little bit. So I want you to sit up in your chair, and if you're comfortable doing this, you can close your eyes. If you're not, you can leave them open. And I want you to put your hand over your belly, and I want you to take a deep breath in, and usually you'll feel your hand rise on the in-breath and fall on the out-breath. So take a deep breath in, feel the hand rise, and then breathe out through your partially closed mouth. Feel the hand fall, breathing in again deeply, feeling the hand rise. And breathing out deeply through your partially closed mouth, feeling the hand fall. Breathing in deeply. And breathing out deeply. So now we're going to move to progressive muscle relaxation. In this part of the exercise, I just want you to tense your muscles first so that the relaxation that follows will be even more relaxing. So let me tell you exactly what we're going to do, and then we can all do it together. I'm going to ask you to make a fist with each hand. I'm going to ask you to tense all the muscles in your belly and your arms, and bring your shoulders right up to your ears. Make a frown, the tightest frown you can with your face. Scrunch your face into kind of a tight ball. And then I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath in, and then I'm going to ask you to exhale that breath with an audible sigh, like going, ah. So we're going to do that twice, and if you feel uncomfortable making the audible sigh, you don't have to do it, but I'll do it, and I'll do it for you. So let's make a fist with each hand. We're all going to do this together now. Tighten all the muscles in your arms, and bring your shoulders up to your ears. Tighten the muscles in your belly. Scrunch your face into the tightest frown you can. Take a deep breath in, and we're going to hold that breath and all that tension to a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then let it out with an audible sigh. Ah. And then we're going to try that again. So make a fist with each hand. Tense all the muscles in your arms and your belly. Bring your shoulders up to your ears. Scrunch your face into the tightest frown you can. Take a deep breath in. Hold all that tension and all that breath for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then let it out with an audible sigh. So that's progressive muscle relaxation. Now I want you to do a body scan where you just notice any tension that's remaining in your body. So let's start at the top of your head and kind of move down. So maybe there's some tension remaining in your forehead. Just notice the muscles in your forehead and let them relax. Notice the tiny muscles around your eyes and let those muscles relax. Lower your tongue and your jaw and lower your jaw just a little bit. Open your mouth just a little bit and let that relax. Notice if there's any tension in your neck and let that relax. Lower your shoulders. Let your shoulders relax. Let your upper back relax. Let your belly relax. Let your lower back relax. Move down to your legs and let your legs relax, your upper legs and then your lower legs. Then move right down to your feet and just notice for a second, what does it feel like to be down there with your feet and your shoes? And just see if you can't relax those muscles there as well. And I want you to take one more deep breath in and let any last remaining tension go right out with that out breath. Now we're going to do just a little short mindfulness meditation. And for that, we're going to do a breath awareness exercise. So I just want you to notice every in-breath, every out-breath, and then I want you to notice the gap that falls between the out-breath and the next in-breath. So just follow along with me. Notice your in-breath, just breathing in normally. Notice your out-breath, just breathing out normally. Then there's always a gap. It might be 5 or 6, 7 seconds. And then your body sort of wants to take another breath, so breathing in, breathing out, and then notice the gap. Breathing in, breathing out, and notice the gap. Breathing in, breathing out, and notice the gap. And whenever you're ready, if you close your eyes, you can open them. And I want you to think about what your stress number is right now. Did we take it down a notch or two? Usually when I'm, in a room with a group of people, usually at least half the people in the room have experienced a lowering of that stress number. So the beautiful thing about these techniques is you can do them anywhere. You can start your day with these techniques. You can do them, and by using your stress number system, if you see yourself getting above a 5 or a 6, you can do this whole series. You can do any one of these things. They're really easy and quick to use. So let's move on to step 5. And in step 5, what I'm teaching people is that, these are the things that people have been teaching about managing stress for decades. Exercise, getting exercise, doing yoga, meditating, learning relaxation techniques like we just learned. But what I want you to do is instead of using them like people typically do, that put stress management last instead of first. They, oh, I had a really bad day, so maybe I'll try, doing a little meditation today. But instead of doing it that way, like a Band-Aid at the end of a bad day, I want you to create a routine. Start small, maybe just a little 5-minute routine where you could be just doing what we just did. Or maybe you go for a walk for 5 minutes or do a little bit of meditating for 5 minutes. But start small, create a resilience routine, and over time, that resilience routine, instead of using it at the end of a bad day, you will start to prevent a bad day from happening. And that's, talk to any regular exerciser or anybody who does any of these things on a regular basis, and you will see that they will give you that testimony that, this is really what it does. It prevents a bad day from happening. Not always, but pretty often. And it's totally worth the time that you invest. So make it a part of your daily routine. That's the difference between resilience and stress management. So here we are at step 6. This is our social support step. And what we know about social support is that you benefit whether you get it or whether you give it. Now, when you're in a position to give it, you absolutely should, because you're going to be expanding your social support network when you do that. And when you need it, that network will be there for you to hold you up. So I really like to focus on giving it here, because I think most of us are in a position to give it, especially people who are in a position to attend a seminar like this. So here's a very simple thing you can do. Now, as human beings, we're wired to connect. That's the research that came out of the emotional intelligence and social intelligence books by Dan Goleman. And what he reported on in those books was that, when you connect with another person, you're going to, your feel-good chemicals are going to be released into your brain, like dopamine and oxytocin. And connecting with another person is really simple. It doesn't take long. You meet somebody in the hallway, really listen to what they have to say, even if it's just for a minute. Make eye contact. Make them feel like they're the only person in the room. Don't do that mindlessness thing where you're, thinking about something else while you're trying to talk to somebody. So really focus on what they're doing, address them by name, and I guarantee when you do that, and I'll often stop the program and actually have that as an exercise that I ask people to do with the person next to them, but we can't do that today. But it really is a powerful exercise, and don't forget to make eye contact, and you will really be rewarded for doing that. I guarantee you, it's really, really powerful. So those are the 6 steps, but where are we going to find the time to do all this? It does sound like a lot, but let's just look at this list, and I think we'll see. And after we go through the list, then we'll put up the last poll question for you. But step 1 is about raising awareness. So all you need to do to raise awareness is think about your stress number. That's it. Just to think about your stress number. Step 2 is problem solving, and making a list of your top 10 sources of stress will get you started on that. Diagnosis is 50% of the cure. Cognitive restructuring. When you see an A coming at you, tease out the space at B and choose how you want to respond. Step 4 is mindfulness. You can do this all day long, just paying attention to what you're doing, no matter what it is, while you're doing it. Thich Nhat Hanh has what he calls a taillight meditation, where he just focuses on the taillights when he's driving in front of him. Step 5 is resilience. Be proactive. Create a resilience routine and start each day at a 0 or a 1. And finally, social support, which is connecting with every single person you meet. So I want you to think about, what are the techniques that appeal most to you? What do you think you want to use in the in the coming days? So let's have our vote and let us know what you think. Is it cognitive restructuring, mindfulness, problem solving, or the 4 to 5 minute relaxation routine that we just did? So we'll leave the poll open for another minute or so, maybe a little less, and when we've got enough responses, Paul, why don't you tell us how people voted?
Okay, we still have a few more people voting. Wait just another minute or so. Okay, it looks like we've got everyone who has voted that's going to vote. And this is interesting, Jim. We're seeing 60% of folks are going to deploy that 4 to 5 minute relaxation routine. I think that'll be the most useful technique for them. That's followed by the cognitive restructuring, 53%, indicating that seems like a really great technique for them to use. Practicing mindfulness, 40%, and problem solving, 33%.
Well, great. Well, that just gives us a little inspiration to really get out there. I just want you to pick one thing and just try it. That's the beautiful thing about this 6-step model, is that you can start anywhere you like. You don't have to go through all the steps. You can just pick a step and go with it. So I really, I'm glad that everybody has arrived at that conclusion. So I think I'm just sort of scrolling ahead to the next slide, and let's see. Yeah, can you push it for some reason it's, oh, there we go. So I want to put, we went to one ahead. So I want to put this, I don't know where, there we go. All right, so I want to put this last question to you. How would this is that whole idea of putting stress management first instead of last. So I want you to think about how your life would be different if peace of mind or stress management were your highest priority. Now, if you remember, just about everybody put family way ahead of everything else. And I can't quite remember how career ended up, but this is how we structure things. And usually people put their health last, and that's how the vote happened. And certainly stress management is probably lower than stress. But what would happen if you put stress management first? And of course, you'd say, well, I'd never put that above, family or career or my spiritual beliefs. And yet, if you did, do you think your family might actually like you more? Do you think if you came home from work because you stopped off at the gym on the way home from work, do you think, you come home a little bit more relaxed, a little more patient, or even if you came home and meditated for 5 minutes and then came down to be with the family, you'll be surprised that, the things that stress management can lift all your goals. You could be a more patient, a more grounded person. You could be a more spiritual person if you put stress management first. You'd probably be more productive at work, and your boss might like you better because you'd be able to concentrate better if you put stress management first. So the point is, putting stress management first raises all your other priorities right up with it. All boats rise, as the expression goes. So with a rising tide. So that's the message that I want to leave you with, is the idea of putting stress management first instead of last. So thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure. I think we have a few minutes to answer any questions that people might have. And I think we've got one more slide here. Whoops, that's the wrong direction. Yeah, there's my contact information if anybody wants to get a hold of me. And I'm happy to answer all email questions. Got my phone number up here. And of course, our website is stressstop.com. So please feel free to contact me. And I guess we can open it up for questions. Paul, do we have any questions from the audience?
We've got one here that's asking if you could talk a little bit more about the difference between positive thinking and cognitive restructuring.
Yeah, a lot of people ask that question, Paul. So thank you to whoever asked that. It's a confusing thing because I'm telling people, we're overly negative in our negative self-talk. But what we're not trying to put a positive spin on a negative event. And that's really important because positive thinking can really let you down in a real life crisis, like getting laid off or going through a medical crisis. Whereas cognitive restructuring won't let you down because you're not trying to sugarcoat anything. You're just trying to take the negative spin off, like, I have the world's worst boss. Well, that's almost undoubtedly not true. So just trying to find the truth in the matter That's the difference between cognitive restructuring and positive thinking. Any other questions?
It looks like that's it. Well, Jim,
Okay.
I really want to thank you. I know my own stress number dropped at least 2 points. So by just practicing these techniques as you took us through it, and I want to thank you for that. And I look forward to continuing doing these things in my daily life and world. And I want to thank everyone for joining us, and hope that you can do the same. And as you're seeing here, Jim's contact information is up on the screen. Also know that we'll make this slideshow available to folks, and that this webinar will be archived. So if you wanted to revisit it or recommend it to somebody else, it'll be available for you to do so. Please also keep an eye out for our follow-up survey email so that you can give us feedback on today's webinar, and importantly, on what specific areas of school employee stress that you would like to address in our second and third resilience webinars in the next year, in the spring, in the winter and the spring. This is a nice, great general overview. We're really wanting to dial it in for you folks, and we're really looking to you to give us some specific areas to look at. So with that, I want to thank Jim again. Thank you all again for attending, and take care.